Paris is sort of set off the beaten path. About 9,000 people. There were farmers, a couple of factories. Everybody went to the same bars and the same places. They lived their lives pretty simply and quietly.
Dyke and Karen Rhodes were a young newlywed couple. They were setting up house in Paris and had a pretty happy life.
Everybody thought that they were a great couple, that they were very much in love. They weren't the type of people that you would figure would be involved in something like this.
In the summer of 1986, Dyke and Karen Rhodes were brutally stabbed to death in their home, and the house was set on fire.
The town was shocked that something like that could happen there, shocked that this couple in particular was the target of such a brutal crime.
There was no physical evidence. The crime scene had been destroyed by a fire.
The police didn't have anything for months, and then these two eyewitnesses came forward.
They had been in the home that night and could positively identify the two men who had fatally stabbed Dyke and Karen Rhodes.
One was a town drunk, one was a drug addict.
The prosecutor basically didn't ask a lot of questions and went forward with the case with the two of them.
The only problem is that their stories didn't make any sense.
Two men were arrested on the eyewitness testimony. They were later convicted. One was sentenced to death row, another was sentenced to life in prison.
My name is David Protes. I'm a professor of journalism at Northwestern University. Let's step back for a second.
Our journalism professor had built a name for himself, taking on cases of the wrongfully convicted.
And that's the difference between the law and journalism. In the fall of 1999, 4 of my students investigated the murders of Dyke and Karen Rhodes.
They're doing the same thing that the prosecution did.
Very rapidly, we started seeing holes in the prosecution's theory of the case.
There's absolutely no record of it in the police report?
There was no physical evidence to link these two men to the crime. There was no reason that they would have killed this couple.
Coincidental to my students' investigation, I got a call from Mike Callahan, the lieutenant of the Illinois State Police.
When I was handed this case, the students had just been there. I've never seen a case that is just so obvious and just so wrong. 5 times I tried to reopen the murder case of this young newlywed couple, and each time my superiors told me the case was too politically sensitive. How is a murder too politically sensitive?
The Long Road, tonight's 48 Hours Mystery. The mystery continues in 90 seconds.
Pictures from the 1986 wedding of Dyke and Karen Rhodes look like most from the 80s, dated outfits, but a predictably joyous young couple.
Make this your bride and your wife.
Ready, they both thought, for a wonderful life together in the small town of Paris, Illinois.
It still is as real as if it was yesterday. And
Dyke's brother Tony and sister Andrea agree. These two truly were kindred spirits.
Once he met her, he was in love.
Right.
That's how Karen looked when we met her.
Karen Spessard was 24 when they married and had a job as an office assistant. Dyke was working in landscaping. Nowhere in those touching pictures is there any hint that the lives of Dyke and Karen Rhodes would come to a violent end in less than 4 months. In the early morning hours of July 6, 1986, a fire engulfed their home.
My dad came over at 6 o'clock in the morning, I never will forget that, and told me that they had been killed. He told me about their house burning, so we just naturally assumed that they had died from the fire. And it wasn't until 2 o'clock that afternoon that we found out that they had been stabbed or murdered.
Justice moved quickly in the horrified town of Paris. Within a year, 2 men were arrested and convicted of the crime.
Want to make comment?
41-year-old Herb Whitlock, a part-time construction worker and small-time drug dealer,
That's why the trials I mentioned.
and his pal, 35-year-old Randy Steidle, who also worked construction and had several convictions for assault. The motive, prosecutors said, a drug deal gone bad. Both men said they were innocent, but of course no one was listening. Until 1999, when a journalism professor from Northwestern University gave his students the Rhodes murder as a class project. Reinvestigate it, he told them, because to him at least, it just didn't add up.
My goal, which I think is the highest goal of our profession, is for them to find the truth.
Professor David Protas has led classes on that search before, and so far his investigations have produced evidence which has helped free 11 innocent men.
Anthony Porter was finally free to publicly show...
Well, this is not your normal homicide, and that's why...
The job of finding the truth about the Rhodes case
We've never dealt with a murder before.
Fell to Kirsten Searer, 20 back then, and to Diane Haig, Greg Johnson,
We'll be there in like 2 or 3 minutes.
and Krista Larson, all a year older.
Whoever committed this murder pretty much committed a perfect murder.
It's become, I don't know, an obsession, if you will.
Sleeping and dreaming about this, eating and thinking about this.
Their professor admitted to having qualms about this mission.
If that's the case, and the two wrong guys are behind bars, that means the actual killer or killers are roaming free. Number one, you're not going to stay anywhere in the immediate vicinity of the town. Number two, you're not going to tell any of the sources you talk to where you're staying.
All right, it's a road.
Number three, I don't want you to stay in the same place 2 nights in a row.
Pedal to the metal, baby.
For the next 9 months,
Oh, I'm sorry.
the students would spend most weekends on the road,
Drive is so long.
making the 180-mile trip from Chicago to the small town of Paris. They would plow through police reports and court records to track down new leads.
Hey, is it all right if we stop by and talk to you again real quick?
And old witnesses, wherever they could find them.
You've interviewed how many people, do you think?
Oh, goodness.
50?
50, more than that.
To their surprise, they soon felt almost as if they had known Dyke and Karen Rhodes.
There's something going on that's not coming out.
Over and over again, the students recreated the crime scene in their mind's eye. Going back to that 4th of July holiday weekend.
Dyke and Karen were sleeping in bed. The people came in. They attacked Dyke first, stabbing him in the back. Karen had time to wake up, maybe grab her glasses off a nightstand, and then was stabbed herself mostly in the chest.
There was blood all over the room, on their clothes, on the bed.
Blood everywhere, but on the suspects.
This young couple was tragically stabbed over 50 times. These men would have been covered in blood. There would have been blood in their automobiles. There would have been blood on their clothes. There would have been hair, fiber, something that linked them to the crime scene. Nothing did.
Remarkably, Professor Protest's skepticism is shared even by Dyke Rhodes's own family.
We weren't 100% convinced that they were the ones who did it.
Their doubt is based on both the lack of physical evidence and on that supposed motive.
The prosecutor contends to this day this was a drug deal gone bad.
Yeah.
Is that something that you can maybe accept?
Absolutely not.
But Dyke had met Whitlock half a dozen times, according to the testimony of a friend who had bought cocaine from Whitlock.
But did Dyke use drugs?
He had been an occasional pot smoker.
What about Karen?
No,
absolutely
never. But there's a big difference in somebody who's an occasional pot smoker and somebody who gets involved with a drug deal that's gone bad and is going to cost you your life.
The students also doubt the drug deal theory, but finding holes in this case isn't as easy as it first seemed, because the juries heard from 2 people who said they had actually been there, eyewitnesses, and one with an incredible story.
You held her down while they stabbed her.
Yep.
Okay, so the first bar we're gonna go to is Boogies.
Back in 1999, the 4 Northwestern journalism students lived every college kid's dream assignment. Staying out late.
We don't need to close it down again this time.
Hitting the bars.
Deep breathing, my leg.
Chugging beer. And all with the blessing of their professor, David Protes.
My feeling was that the way an investigation like this begins is by becoming part of the culture of the town.
Because understanding Paris, Illinois may be key to understanding who killed Dyke and Karen Rhodes and whether the men convicted of this crime really are guilty.
So we get to McDonald's, turn right, but don't go down High Street, angle left onto Crawford.
Weekend after weekend.
Nobody's home. Nobody's home.
The students struggled with their investigation.
What's your view of this group of Northwestern students?
Michael McFatridge had prosecuted the Rhodes case.
I think when the dust settles, they'll be very disappointed because, in fact, Whitlock and Steidel are guilty. I mean, they're murderers.
But in 1986, the young prosecutor had had a tough time building a case against Whitlock and Steidel.
There's probable cause or reason to hold the Mr. Steidel and Mr. Whitlock for several counts of murder.
The students quickly learned that the investigation into the murders of Dyke and Karen Rhodes had gone absolutely nowhere for 2 months, until, amazingly, an eyewitness stepped forward with an astounding tale. He claimed that he actually had seen Whitlock and Steidel at the scene of the crime.
I believe in September of '86, Darrell Harrington came forward.
And who was Darrell Harrington?
He's been described to me as the town drunk.
At the time, that would be a fair assessment. He was a big drinker.
Are you aware that your voice is being recorded?
Yeah.
Harrington uses an artificial larynx. We've added a voice to repeat his words to make them clearer.
Yelling and screaming.
In this taped statement to police,
Plenty yelling and screaming.
Harrington said he woke up in Randy Steidel's car
Apparently somebody was damn scared about something.
outside the home of Dyke and Karen Rhodes.
I could hear a woman screaming and a man saying, "Please don't hurt me or kill me," or something like that.
After using his credit card to jimmy open the lock, Harrington told police he went inside and up the stairs, where Steidel confronted him.
Darrell, did you notice anything different about Randy?
He had blood on him.
Did he have anything with him?
He had a knife. Then I looked up and saw a body on the bed.
He knew certain things, at least in our minds, were not things the town drunk would know.
Town drunk or not, Harrington was key to the investigation. But without a confession, McFatridge was stuck.
We were not going to indict or charge somebody until we had a reasonable chance of conviction. We had one eyewitness, and with no corroborative evidence.
But 5 months later, all that changed when, incredibly, a second eyewitness came forward with that much-needed corroborating evidence. Deborah Reinbold, a self-described drug addict and alcoholic, had told police she'd not only seen it all, she'd provided a 5-inch knife, even helped with the killing.
It gets worse and worse as the years go by.
By the time the students began their investigation, Deborah Reinbold claimed she was clean and sober. But in 1986...
You know, I always drank, I always drugged.
What happened that night?
Big mess. Everything went wrong. I mean, they were just going to go down there and try to scare Dyke, and then things just got out of hand.
How well did you know Herb and Randy at the time this happened?
I knew him, just through the drug thing.
You can remember seeing them stab Dyke?
Mm-hmm.
Both of them?
Mm-hmm.
And what's happening with Karen in the meanwhile?
She's trying to get up off the bed, and I had went over there and was telling her that everything would be okay.
You held her down while they stabbed her?
Yep.
Where did this knife come from?
It was my husband's knife, and they wanted it.
Reinbold's story had impressed police, especially when she'd accurately described a broken lamp found in the Rhodes' bedroom.
So it was broken before they were killed, or while they were being killed?
Yeah.
2 separate juries believed both the eyewitness accounts. And in 1987, despite their unwavering protests of innocence, the 2 men were convicted. Herb Whitlock got life, and Randy Steidel the death penalty.
I defy anybody to say I was proved guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. I had no involvement whatsoever in that crime.
Do you know anything about it in terms of who did?
I wished I did. I truly wished I did.
I had a little belief that that there was justice in the system. I was pretty naive. I'm not naive anymore.
Did you kill Dyke and Karen Rhodes?
Absolutely not. As long as I breathe, I'll never accept what's been done to me. So I'm just stuck, anger and depression.
Although Prosecutor McFatridge had recommended no jail time for the two eyewitnesses, Deborah Reinbold did serve 2 years in prison for concealing a homicide. Harrington never was charged. But months into their investigation, the Northwestern students found new evidence. Evidence that cast serious doubts on the testimony of the state's two star witnesses. The burned-out bedroom of Dyke and Karen Rhodes was a gruesome crime scene, but it produced no forensic evidence at all implicating the two men convicted of the murders.
It did not happen the way that the state's witnesses said that it did.
First off, the students doubted Darrell Harrington's story, which had put the murders shortly after midnight.
You could hear a pin drop 2 blocks away.
They tracked down witnesses who challenged that timeline. One had been a neighbor of the Rhodes.
You would think that with the house located just 100 yards away, we would have heard something.
This crime occurred much later in the night, at a time when Randy Steidle and Herb Whitlock were nowhere near the scene.
And there's one other thing that doesn't quite add up. Harrington told police that after the murders, he was standing here by what was then the Rhodes garage with Randy Steidle. Deborah Reinbold also says she stood here with Randy Steidle. Both eyewitnesses saw Randy Steidle, but remarkably, they never saw each other.
You know, the fact that they're both there but that they don't see each other, to me, that just didn't make any sense at all.
It could have happened that way. As a matter of fact, must have happened that way.
Former prosecutor Michael McFatridge.
That argument was presented at trial to 2 different juries by 2 different defense attorneys. The juries found the defendants guilty.
McFatridge may not find this odd, but his star witness, Deborah Reinbold, sure did.
I thought, somebody's made this up, somebody's lost their friggin' mind, this is the town drunk. There is no way this man was there.
But what about Deborah Reinbold's own story? Her testimony was key to the guilty verdicts. After all, she said she'd seen the murders. Even said she helped.
Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give should be...
In 1996, 9 years after the convictions, Reinbold matter-of-factly stated in a sworn statement to Randy Steidle's lawyer that she had lied on the stand.
What parts were untrue?
Oh, I don't know that Randy was there. I don't know that Herbie was there.
As for those impressive details she provided about what she had seen inside the house?
Had you ever been in Dyke and Karen Rhodes' house?
No.
But hold on to your hats.
Were you there the night of the murders?
No.
Beginning of this tape, you hold up your hand, you take an oath. This is absolutely true.
And I understand that. I understand I did that.
In a head-spinning reversal, Deborah Reinbold later insisted that she actually was lying on the tape, that her original eyewitness account of being at the scene of the crime was and is true. Is it? Well, it's pretty hard to know. Over the years, Deborah Reinbold has changed her story more than half a dozen times.
Why have you changed your story so many times?
Basically, wanting to get out of this, just wanting it over. The bottom line is, I can't change a story that's true.
Well, you have several times.
And keep it changed, is what I'm saying.
You know, when you look at the crime scene and you look at the...
Bill Clutter, an investigator working on the Randy Steidle case, thinks he has proof, beyond her various accounts, that Deborah Reinbold never saw the murders at all. Remember that broken lamp?
The prosecution used the lamp as the centerpiece of their evidence corroborating Deborah Reinbold's account of what happened this night.
And it made her believable.
It made her believable.
Reinbold testified the lamp was broken when she got to the Rhodes' bedroom.
It was broken before the fire.
Yeah.
After the fire, black soot covered the crime scene.
It's absolutely white. It's bone white.
You're contending that if the lamp had been broken, the inside of it, the broken pieces would have had soot on them.
We would have had soot on it.
So Deborah Reinbold couldn't possibly have seen it broken.
She could not have seen a broken lamp.
How could that have happened?
I have no clue.
In the same sworn statement in which she denied being at the crime scene, Reinbold also said the police fed her the information about the lamp.
They'd come up with, well, there was a broken vase or a broken lamp there. And then I'd say, well, okay, so there was.
Did you ever ask Herb or Randy why they did this?
I don't think it ever crossed my mind to ask him.
I mean, they've slaughtered 2 people right in front of your eyes, and you never asked them why?
No, I didn't. I probably wouldn't today.
For the students, it all added up to more than a reasonable doubt, especially when they started turning up other witnesses the police never had talked to, one of whom pointed them in an entirely new direction.
Do you remember the weekend of July 4th in 1986?
Yes, I do.
This woman let the students videotape her, but she was so frightened she asked that we obscure her face and alter her voice.
I noticed 2 men standing opposite the streetlight by Doc and Karen's house. But what caught my eye was they had trench coats on in July.
She said she saw them around 9 o'clock the night before the murders.
And one of them was a big guy with blonde hair, and the other guy was small framed and looked like he had dark hair, but they were just standing there looking toward Doc and Karen's house.
And she thinks she saw the same 2 men the next night, the night of the murders.
This car started coming around, and it was white with a gold stripe down it, and it had Florida license plates. It would just go by. Turn in front of Doc and Karen's house, stop, and I seen them looking, you know, and then take off. They did this about 10 times, just, I mean, continuously. Why would anyone be doing that?
Across town, the students also tracked down a gas station attendant who worked the night shift and who remembered selling a lot of extra gas to a man driving a car with Florida plates.
Several containers of gasoline. You know, that's not uncommon at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but 3 o'clock in the morning, I thought, well, that's strange.
Do you recall how much gas you sold to this man?
Yeah, I do. It was 21 gallons, because it was in like 7 3-gallon cans.
An hour later, the Rhodes' house was ablaze. Paris police had interviewed the gas station attendant, but the Florida connection went nowhere. The police never even knew about the other witness, who over the years hasn't exactly volunteered information.
You think you may have seen the actual killers?
I mean, the thought crosses my mind. Was that them?
But what would their motive be? The students came up with a new theory.
Is this Sean?
One that focused on Karen, not on Dyke.
Karen had told several family members and friends that she had seen something at work that had scared her.
Something she stumbled on in the parking lot of the pet food plant where she worked. An incident involving other people from the factory.
She had seen large amounts of money and a gun put in a trunk that was on its way to Chicago.
According to a friend the students interviewed, Karen was very worried.
Karen came to this woman. She was very distraught. She was very scared and upset and said that she had tried to quit her job.
Professor Protest wonders if there could be some link between what Karen saw and the shadowy men from Florida.
Who are these guys? Why'd they come to Paris?
This former police detective thinks he may have the answers to many of the students' questions, and he says those answers may have cost him his career.
I worked many years undercover in the trenches. I would take on the undercover assignments that a lot of people wouldn't.
The Northwestern students didn't know it at the time, but this seasoned investigator also would conclude that the men in prison for the Rhodes murders were innocent.
I was working a lot of narcotics.
I saw you dump that out of the chute.
20 years in investigations.
I was buying drugs.
Hundreds of felony arrests.
Michael Callahan's career with the Illinois State Police spanned nearly 2.5 decades.
Master Sergeant Michael A. Callahan.
He was promoted 3 times over the years.
I busted my butt for the Illinois State Police. I worked long hours. I dedicated myself.
And in the year 2000, he made lieutenant and was asked to review the Paris murder investigation. Shortly before 48 Hours was to air a program about it. He had no idea what he was getting into.
This is by far the worst investigation I've ever seen. This is the case, a Xerox copy of the original case file that I was asked to review.
Every single one of these little markers, these little flags, represents some contradiction or some problem with the case?
Yes, there's probably hundreds in here. Evidence or information or leads that weren't followed that should have been followed. Again, contradictions of what people said in these reports. Some pretty serious stuff.
Including serious questions. Questions the students also had raised about the real motive for the murders.
The case file basically said that this was over a bad drug deal. It wasn't over drugs. I mean, you look at Dyke and Karen, they had $200 in their savings account at the time of their deaths. They're not major narcotics traffickers by any means.
Like the students, Callahan was drawn to those stories of what Karen may have stumbled on at work. Not just large sums of money that seemed out of place, but also a machine gun.
She started questioning things, and I think that's what got her in trouble.
Callahan wondered if someone at Karen's job knew something about the murders. Karen had told family and friends that she had seen something in the parking lot at work, something that made her afraid, and she was thinking about quitting her job.
Basically, she knew too much.
She stumbles across something. She then is murdered.
Yes.
You have reached essentially the same theory that the Northwestern students reached.
Mm-hmm.
And this information was available to the original investigators as well?
Yes.
Or could have been?
Yes, or could have been.
But if Karen did see money and a machine gun, what did it mean? Was there any connection to where she worked? To find out would take a new investigation. But Callahan says that in 2000, no one in the state police was welcoming a new investigation, and that in fact, when he tried to pursue one, his superiors yanked the rug right out from under him.
I was told that I could not reopen the Rhodes case, that it was too politically sensitive.
They actually told you
Yes.
This is too politically sensitive?
Too politically sensitive. I will never forget that day as long as I live.
No one ever explained to Callahan what too politically sensitive meant.
How many times did you try to get this case reopened?
Officially to Springfield 5 times.
And every single time?
Something happened.
Why Callahan's investigation was blocked never was clear. In 2003, he was transferred out of investigations, and that ended his pursuit of the Paris murders for good.
I had a great reputation, and then they took that all away from me. They humiliated me. I know I took it out on my wife and my son. It took my son making that statement to me. He just said, "I wish I had my old dad back." That broke my heart. Still does.
But he refused to give up.
Oh, there's the old touch.
Instead, he sued the Illinois State Police, claiming they had transferred him to shut him up. Not only about the Rhodes murders, but also about reports he'd made to Internal Affairs, alleging inappropriate conduct by superiors.
I was being punished for being too candid.
That's how you interpret this. You were punished.
Oh, yes.
For having actually done what you were assigned to do.
Yes. I spoke out on a matter of public interest, and I was retaliated against for doing that.
Callahan's case against the state police went to federal court.
I fought for myself, and I fought for the victims here.
He argued that his superiors muzzled him and violated his right to free speech, in part because he was trying to investigate any possible connection between what Karen saw at work and the Rhodes murders.
Nobody's above the law. This isn't how things are supposed to be in small-town America or in a major city.
Callahan, now retired, found his own vindication. In 2005, he was awarded $360,000. A jury agreed he had been punished for just trying to do his job.
People come to us for the truth, and we should always try to do the right thing.
This wasn't just a situation where the cops didn't do a very good job.
No, that's my opinion, that they were framed.
But fortunes are about to change, with a development that the students, the cop, and the prisoners all have worked long and hard for, and never thought they'd see. The Northwestern students graduated in 2000. feeling as if they had left one course with an incomplete grade.
We left this unfinished business, but there was nothing that we could do.
There were times after we first graduated, I just wanted to get back in my car and go back to Paris because really, I mean, you feel like you're leaving it behind and the work is undone.
They thought they had done the impossible, finding new witnesses, new evidence, enough they thought to lead to a new police investigation.
The whole case was so ridiculous that as soon as everybody heard about the details, then they would say, this is crazy, let these people out.
But Herb Whitlock and Randy Steidle stayed right where they'd been for more than a decade, in prison.
I never felt like we did enough. It was so hard to leave.
The students eventually began their new careers in journalism.
Hi, Al. This is Greg Johnson from the Post.
Greg at the St. Louis Post-Dispatch.
You're the president of the parish council at Sacred Heart, right?
Diana, reporter in Shreveport, Louisiana. Krista, also working in print. Then, 5 years after the young journalists first began digging into the Rhodes case, came the story they all had so desperately wanted to write.
Something that you kind of steeled yourself, you were always hoping for, but steeled yourself against getting your hopes up too much.
In a remarkable reversal, a federal judge ruled that Randy Steidle's original attorney made a big mistake in not challenging the credibility of those two eyewitnesses, a mistake that could have affected the verdict.
I was at home and I got a call from one of the lawyers.
All charges were dropped.
Another former death row inmate has been freed from prison here in Illinois.
Randy Steidle, once on death row, was a free man.
I present to you now my brother, Randy Steidle.
First of all, I want to thank God, because without his strength and the love and the support of my family, and especially my mother,
I'm glad that the ceiling in my home is high enough to accommodate how high I jumped.
pretty great feeling after 17 years, 3 months, and 3 weeks.
It's a wonderful day in the neighborhood.
And who was there?
My brother, my mother, a lot of friends.
Also in the crowd,
There's 2 of them that showed up at the prison the day I walked out.
2 of the former students, Greg and Kirsten.
So great to see you out.
Finally, a federal judge saw this case for what it was.
Were you surprised?
Yeah, I was. I'm really happy that David protested and those kids got involved.
It's just weird to be here and see this happen finally and see him not behind bars and see how great it is that he's out.
But someone was missing.
You just couldn't help feeling guilty for being there when Herb was still in prison.
Herb Whitlock.
Does having Whitlock still there make you feel somehow, I don't know, it's like almost sort of survivor guilt, you know? I mean,
well, it does in a way, because him and I took different paths fighting our case.
While Steidle's case was heard by a federal judge, Whitlock's has stayed in the state system, where his appeals have been repeatedly heard and repeatedly denied.
I finally got a real judge in federal court who actually read the record for the very first time that I believe in 15, 16 years it had ever been looked at.
After Steidle's success, Herb Whitlock tried again, asking a state judge to overturn his conviction based on the same questionable evidence and inadequate legal counsel.
I just don't have much faith in the circuit courts.
Indeed, the judge dealt Whitlock a stunning blow, ruling that his lawyer did an adequate job and that the eyewitnesses on the issues that mattered could be believed.
Which means that we have one of the most horrible miscarriages of justice in our state's history.
Journalism professor David Protes.
Where, based on the same pathetic evidence, one man could be free while Herb Whitlock languishes in prison for the rest of his life. And that would just be a tragedy beyond words.
The situation could very well just as easily have been reversed.
It could have been. It could have been. In fact,
He says he thinks about that a lot and only hopes that somehow Herb Whitlock eventually also will be free.
I don't know what time I'll be home.
Meanwhile, Steidle struggles to reestablish his life. He gets a new job at a local factory.
I've worked from July on of last year steady, 8, 10-hour days.
And tries hard to somehow fit in.
Ever used an ATM?
I tried a couple of times. Like that?
No, that's upside down.
That's backwards. I can see why you don't use it. While Steidl adjusts to life as a free man, Whitlock files yet another appeal, based both on ineffective counsel and also on a new claim that the prosecution withheld evidence. This time, an appeals court sees it his way. And finally, on January 8, 2008, Whitlock gets the news he has waited so long to hear.
61-year-old Herb Whitlock, a free man.
His conviction is overturned. At last, he too is free.
Prosecutor this morning moved to dismiss the case against Mr. Whitlock, and Mr. Whitlock is now out of custody.
Whitlock credits his attorney, Richard Kling.
It was Herb's unwillingness to give up. For 22 years, he's been maintaining his innocence. For 22 years, it's been falling on a lot of deaf ears. He is the one that we really toast today because he's the one who deserves it. Mike Callahan is another hero. Mike Callahan went after witnesses that other people wanted to hide. He talked about reports that other people had deep sixth. Mike Callahan is also very special people.
There's a lot of mixed emotions. I'm very happy for Herb Whitlock. I think this is a justice a long time coming for Herbie.
For the first time in 2 decades, Herb Whitlock turns his back on prison and is able to hold hands with his daughter.
To tell you the truth, I really didn't anticipate ever getting out of there.
A few days later, he returns to a place he once called home.
I knew it was getting in bad shape, but I didn't realize how bad.
The family farm has gone to seed.
I'm angry, but I'm not necessarily bitter and going to eat myself up with anger over what's been done.
But Whitlock's eager to get to work.
I'm going to restore it. I'm going to put it back at least like it was when I lived here.
Determined to make up for lost time.
Everybody's got to make the best out of their circumstances in life, no matter what it is. That's not hokey, that's the truth.
But for the Rhodes family, who always had doubts about the investigation into the murders of Karen and Dyke, justice only will come when they know what really happened that hot July night so long ago.
It's just not something that you're able to be at peace with at all.
It's like an open sore that just doesn't heal. The truth is still out there in my view.
And I think it'll be found someday.